the materialistic and now scientific materialistic paradigm is that we are our bodies and nothing else. The mind is a product of brain activity. The soul is an illusion people have bought into or is only programmed into them by religion. Can you share your conceptions in regard to the true nature of human beings and what some of the real challenges are that arise when one subscribes to the materialist belief that the totality of their being resides in their body?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's something that I can speak to from my own experience as an anesthesiologist, having chaperoned 20,000 people to a state of, deep unconsciousness and back. And in the context of not having a mechanism by which we can explain how inhaled anesthetics work. And the answer is obvious. The reason why we haven't answered that question is because if you simply look at our paradigm, which is biochemical processes result in awareness, then you are now faced with a problem, which is which structures then are responsible for your awareness. And our approach, our deconstructive approach, will inevitably lead to, either areas in the prefrontal cortex or the brainstem, which are, sources of awareness. But why? We're going to have to look at, what's happening in those particular structures. What are the molecular interactions that result in something we call awareness? Is there a molecule? No, there's no molecule. I mean, can consciousness really be expressed materially? And the answer is obviously no. I mean, intuitively, we should understand that that cannot be. And the reason why this is so important, and to back that up, we have so much evidence that our consciousness is non-local. Right there in the operating room, right? We have near-death experiences where someone is clinically dead by our standards, yet returns to life and remembers what was said, done in the proper sequence. Like, these are not interpretations of random firings of neurons in the brain that are interpreted post hoc. They remember everything. So, and usually it's from above. So clearly, and you're a remote viewer, you know this, like you can bring your awareness to any place in the universe if you wanted to, but we see this in our own experience as physicians. And then we have this enormous amount of evidence behind reincarnation on this planet. Here I'm referring to Dr. Ian Stevenson, who is a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, who's, passed, but he documented thousands of,
I know of at least 2,500 cases he documented.
correct, 2,500 cases of people who remember their past lives. And these are not people that are 45 years old and claim that, they were Cleopatra. We're talking about children from the time that they could first start forming words, told their parents about a previous life. And in some cases, rather than telling the child to keep quiet and don't make up stories, the parents were interested in these stories, documented them. And what's amazing is that Stevenson and his researchers found the family from which the child had lived in and died. And the child, when reunited, if you will, with these family members, can identify everybody in the family, their names, who is even identify the imposters that are brought in to see if the child truly can remember things.
And they even identified their houses. They knew exactly what the houses looked like, and many of them were still there. I know of one case, the kid knew he died as a fighter pilot. He not only knew the tail number of his airplane, he knew the names of the men on his crew and the name of the ship, and Ian Stevenson found naval records, and lo and behold, every single bit of it was there. And what was really trippy is in many cases, he's got pictures of these people in this lifetime. And when they find pictures of them in their past life, like this guy that was a fighter pilot, their bodies look so similar. It's crazy. It really goes back to another metaphysical principle, is that the soul essentially creates the body that it wants for the mission that it's going to be on.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much of this research. It's, how could anyone just deny this? This is like a mental disease to deny what is so obvious. It's like, are you kidding me?
Right. Yes, it is. It's crazy how blind we are to what's right in front of us. And I believe Stevenson wrote another tome that talked about, the like you mentioned, the physicality of the new body. And very often, the mechanism of injury in the previous life, a gunshot wound, for example, the child will have birthmarks at that same spot,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely. Very consistently.
Very consistently. I mean, this is like you said, more proof that our soul is giving rise to the body and not the other way around. But here's what's really interesting is if we were able to truly embody the idea that our existence does not terminate when we die, that doesn't mean that life is no longer precious. It is still very precious. It's a beautiful experience that needs to be enjoyed and learned from. However, that is the leverage point by which systems can control us. The fear, the absolute fear of termination. And this is why I believe there is a conspiracy, if you will, to not recognize this in science, because if you have a population that is unafraid to die, they cannot be controlled. They can be controlled to some extent, but not completely. It's our connection to our body, our connection to the idea that this is all we have, is what drives us to be fearful and also drives us to hold a competitive posture with everyone around us. Because if time is limited, then of course you're going to try to outmaneuver everybody else for a bigger piece of the pie. And we've created with our own thought system this kind of world where we're in constant competition and we're afraid. But the thing about reincarnation, and here I'm positing, of course, I don't have any proof of this, but I believe that every advanced civilization, at some point, like when they're in our density of consciousness, or third density, if you will, by the law of one standards, comes to realize that they're reincarnating. It becomes obvious. And I believe that this is the emergence of what Raw would call a social memory complex, is when everybody comes to the conclusion that this is how it works, people. And so many things will happen when this happens. For example, if we know we're coming back, we're not going to make policy decisions based on a 10-year horizon or a 4-year horizon or a 2-year horizon. We're going to be looking ahead 2,000 years or 10,000 years, because we are going to suffer or benefit from the fruits of our actions today. We're going to make completely different decisions. Moreover, all of the angst that we're feeling right now in terms of our identification with ethnicities and generational trauma, what if you realized that you were the ones that suffered back then, or you were the perpetrator 200 years ago? You were the slave owner. But at some point, a civilization will come to the understanding, it's like, why are we tormenting each other? Because we're suffering because we were tormenting each other back then and we're tormenting each other now. Let's realize that we're in this together forever.
Yeah. I mean, the Native American Indians and many Native cultures always had the rule, think about what you're about to do will do for 7 generations ahead. They're always thinking 7 generations ahead because of exactly this reason. Not so much from most of them believed in reincarnation from my studies, but the point is, if what you're doing today is going to make it harder for your children to survive tomorrow, then you're making a deadly choice. And so here we are with a scientific materialistic paradigm making choices that are destroying the entire ecosystems of the planet and each other. And we keep doing this stupid shit as a world population over and over again, like Groundhog Day. But the planet itself can't keep playing this game because we've taken this ecosystem to a point of near collapse. People need to think more about these things do than what the next upgrade on their iPhone is going to be, or who's going to win the fucking Super Bowl, or that kind of stuff. This is why I like to quote, never trust a man whose television screen is bigger than his bookshelf. It means he's spent too much time getting programmed and not really looking into the source of things.
Here, you and I are in agreement about what's happening, but we have no proof of that. I mean, proof is subjective, which is very, very difficult to get by. But the point here is, given the fact that you cannot know, what paradigm are you going to subscribe to? And think about the implications of how you choose to live. As you said, we continue to pillage the earth without any regard to how our children are going to survive on it. So even though there are kids, we seem to take no notice of that. However, if we realized that we were going to suffer the consequences, that might be enough. But the point here is, given the fact that you have an option, you can choose how you want to regard reality or existence. Why are you choosing agnosticism when it's clear that if we adopted the idea, the assumption that we reincarnate, of course we would be very productive, and we would treat Gaia the way it should be treated, and we're not going to exploit each other. That's the obvious answer. Like, you don't have to have proof to realize that that's what's going to happen. And this is where, it's important to see where your biases are, and what is driving you to not do what's the obvious choice.